Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. My name is Amy Fagan, and my guest today is a special guest. She's a friend of mine. This is Angel B. Hartwell of Wealthy Life Mentor. That is the business name. That's your business name. But she's also a podcaster, many times podcaster, like award-winning podcaster. And she's a friend of mine from the New England Podcasters Group. So, Angel, thank you so much for joining me. And please fill in where I forgot to give you all your credits.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Amy. And yeah, I have lots of credits. I have my business, The Wealthy Life Mentor, and I also have two podcasts, Wickedly Smart Women, which is number one internationally ranked twice. We made number one internationally ranked twice with Wickedly Smart Women. And it's a 14-time award-winning podcast and brand. It's more than just a podcast. It's its own brand with offers and opportunities for people to work with us through that brand. And then I have a three-time award-winning. My other podcast is called Leading Visionaries, three-time award-winning podcast, and that one is only a year and maybe a year and a half old now. And that one is also building itself into being a brand, which will have its own body of work and offerings as well. So, yeah.
Soon enough. Soon enough, it will be all the things.
Yeah, it's
But
all the
three
things.
times winning, three times award winning already.
Yeah, this one's already three-time award winning and it's a top 50 ranked and it's in the top 10% of all podcasts across all genres, according to Listen Notes. And that one's actually my third podcast. My first podcast I actually sold. So I started my first podcast back in 2018, and that was called Men on Purpose. So I've had Men on Purpose, which was sold. I was the first independent podcaster that I know of that has sold a podcast. Since then, subsequently, other podcasters in my cohort of people that I know in the space came to me and asked me for help in getting their podcast sold. And then so Men on Purpose, Wickedly Smart Women, and Leading Visionaries is non-gender specific. So
Awesome. And so today we're talking business. So Angel is talking about sustainability in the business world, but I also want to sort of touch on the fact that she is not just a very successful business owner, podcaster, all the things, professional person, but she is also she's a badass in the home. We were talking before we started recording. So Angel's in New Hampshire. She grew up in New Hampshire. And she's like super Girl Scout. I mean, I remember when I was like introducing myself in the podcast group and I'm like, and I have a jam business. And she's like, oh, what kind of jam do you make? I make blah, 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 blah. I make all these fancy jams. I'm like, yeah, I make blueberry and raspberry. And so Angel is no stranger to the kitchen.
not at all. In fact, since we're talking about Girl Scouts, two funny things about Girl Scouts. First, the very first badge I ever got in Girl Scouts was cooking. The cooking badge was my first badge. And then I got all the badges. And the other interesting thing about Girl Scouts is in Girl Scouts, that's where I actually turned on my businesswoman and learned how to sell.
Aha.
Girl Scouts is a great place to learn how to sell. And I sold at 9 years old. This was way before there was internet, long, long ago and far, far away in the land before internet.
Right?
And before Girl Scouts were even allowed to sell cookies at grocery stores, we went door to door. We went
Right.
door to door and we picked up the telephone, which used to sit on a wall, you know what I mean, or on a table. We picked up the telephone and called people. I sold 769 boxes of Girl Scout cookies. The next nearest girl sold 28.
Oh,
So and my mom was the cookie chairman. And so the UPS man brought all the cookies to our house. And I remember that literally the boxes of cookies were stacked up to the ceiling in our living room. And, almost all of them were mine, the ones that I had sold.
right,
So,
right. Because
yeah.
28, the next
28
one.
was the next nearest girl, and I think our troop probably only had about 15 girls in it. So I sold 763, and the rest of them sold maybe
Double digits.
24. Yeah, maybe maybe a couple hundred boxes
Wow.
together, all of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, phones were literally attached to things.
Yes,
Not
they
not
were.
ears, not hands, but they were attached to things.
That's right.
That's impressive. I mean, so, and do you remember, because I don't remember back that long ago, but I know that Girl Scout cookie season is like March, which is when it's, the dead of winter, and you were going door to door. Was it still March? Do you remember?
Yeah, I really don't remember, but it was probably the winter time. It probably was the winter time. I mean, it's been a long, many, 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 many trips around the sun since I was
Right?
9.
Yeah. But I mean, impressive, whatever season that is, whatever season it was when you did that. But so, and so you were saying also that you do like foraging and you can make fire and stuff like that. These are all, Girl Scout badge worthy things, but
I don't think we had a foraging badge in Girl Scouts, but in 2020, I think it was 2020, maybe it was 2019, at the end of 2019, before the pandemic, just before the pandemic started, I decided I had been thinking about mushrooms for the longest time. And so I decided to get this. There was a thing that popped up on Facebook or somewhere. I think it was probably Facebook or YouTube. This guy, his name is Adam Harriton, and he has done an amazing job at putting together a course for identifying mushrooms on his site, learnyourland.com. I love Adam Harriton. And so I bought that for myself for Christmas. I bought his course. And he does so much on YouTube that, you could learn a ton without buying the course, but the course was like $300 or $400. And I was like, I just want to support this guy because he's so enthusiastic. And every day in the winter of 2020, like as we were getting into the pandemic, I would watch one of his videos. And then in the spring, when it came mushroom season, one of the things he suggested was to join a local group. Join a local group. And he's out of Pennsylvania, so it was mostly the mushrooms of the Northeast that he was teaching us about. So I found a Facebook group and I found a club, the Monadnock Mushroomers over in Western New Hampshire, and I went out for the first time in July. But before that, I had gone out just photo foraging, just to see, like, oh, like there's a mushroom. And I would take the picture and then I would try to figure out what it was. And so I went with the foraging group for the first time in July, and they actually had a professional, like, scientist. Like, this guy has named mushrooms. He's gone, he's literally named mushrooms and written big fat books, academic books, and he goes all over the world, who came out of that mushroom club. He had been in that club when he was a little, like,
wow.
teenager. So he was on the hike with us. We had him and then the hike leader. Like, the club leaders would always lead the actual hike, and then we try to have somebody who's the identifier. And when he said to me, "You can eat those," I got chanterelles. That was my first time having chanterelles. He said, "You can eat those." I was like, okay, if this guy tells me I can eat them, then I feel like I can at least try them. So I brought them home and I sauteed them up, and they were so unbelievably delicious. I was like, oh my God. It was like magic in my mouth. So yeah, I'm a forager.
Wow, that's fun. One of my very first guests on the podcast was my physical therapist, and he talked about Learn Your Land as well, because he would forage for mushrooms, of course. So that I have heard of that. I have not watched a lot, but I
Love
don't trust
Adam.
myself with foraging. I feel like there are a lot of things that look very similar, and I would pick the wrong one and get sick. But
Yeah, well, that's why you want to watch the videos and learn everything that you can about mushrooms. And now, just a warning to people, do not trust the shit that you see on Facebook that looks like rainbows, because that's all bull crap. That's all like AI garbage. It's difficult and challenging enough to learn how to identify edible wild mushrooms, which are incredibly delicious. We don't need that um those distractions of people making the mushrooms look like no mushrooms on earth actually look. I'm pretty opposed to that,
It's
Amy.
frustrating.
Pretty angry about that.
Right, it's hard enough. Like,
Stop doing
don't
that.
throw untrue stuff out there for sure.
Right. Stop doing that. So yeah, you want to really be wise, and you want to be with a group of people who have some experience and expertise and can say, yes, that is chicken of the woods, or yes, that is a chanterelle, or yes, that is
Yeah.
hen of the woods, or whatever, we're looking at. And our group encourages us to also learn the Latin names. So, Grifola frondosa, Laetoporus sulphurus, and Cantharellus are the three that I just mentioned. So
Wow.
not in the same order, but
That's
yeah.
impressive. And y'all, I sprung this on Angel before we started recording. I'm like, can we talk some personal stuff instead of just business? So this is not, she's not like reading this. She didn't study up or anything. She just knows this stuff, which is crazy and cool. But so, all right, Angel. So we wanted to talk about business. And I know one of the things that the message that you said that you wanted to share, that you wanted people to come away with was that getting support for building the business of your dreams is essential. Getting support is essential. And so that intrigued me. I totally get it. But can you talk about that a little bit?
I can. So I want to just give a little like backstory. So I spent 20 years in the real estate business. And at the end of that career, I developed with two partners um, a big project, 51 single family houses, 56 apartments, and an office building. And then I had a spiritual awakening and kind of a life rupture over the course of several years. And as a result of that spiritual awakening, I ended up on a healing journey, and I left behind real estate, and I discovered my artist, I discovered my speaker, I discovered my author, I discovered like all these latent parts of myself. And then I got the call to support others to make those kinds of transitions where you are leaving behind something and
Mm,
stepping into a new calling, stepping into a new life. And when I first left real estate, the first thing I did was like I just spent 2 years exploring and using my credit cards and borrowing against my home equity to be able to just liberate myself from a life that I had spent like really in the box. I had spent like 20 years in that business. And at the end of that 2 year period, I I invested for the very first time in a training course, and it was called the Self-Help Authors Crash Course. And the reason why I invested was because I had, as a result of this journey through my spiritual awakening, I left behind real estate, I got divorced, all those things. Um, I had this idea for this card deck, and it was called Dance Through Your Divorce. And I, like, within one day, all of the cards came out of me, and I had all the cards, and I put in, made art of each of the cards, and I started writing, the meaning behind each of the cards, and I had 55 cards, or 45 cards. And so I was like, oh my goodness, I need to do something with this. I need to, you know
yeah.
get it into a card deck box kind of thing. And so I didn't know anything about that at all. And so I found this self-help authors crash course because that was the only thing I could find
Mm,
that was even remotely close at the time. This was way back in you know, the early 2000s. It was probably 2005 or something. I took this course, and I took this 12-week course. And at the end, the woman who was running the course said, because that was when we got to tell her what we were working on,
mm,
and everybody else was working on books, and I had this card deck project. And she said, "Oh, um, that's not something I can help you with. That's not a because she was about helping authors. She
okay.
said that's book packaging. That's a book packaging kind of project. And back then, you had to go through all kinds of hoops to be able to get that to happen. Um, Now it's pretty easy, it's very, very easy compared to what it was back then. So I was a little disappointed when I got to the end of my 12 weeks and
Really?
discovered she couldn't help me. She couldn't help me. She didn't know any book packagers. She was a New York Times bestselling author. That was the world that she knew. But I learned a lot of things by investing to work with somebody to help me in that way. And after I got done with that whole thing, I then got clear, okay, no, I actually now need to be a speaker because I put the box of cards, it's like in cold storage still to this day. It's under the stairs in cold storage, the Dance Through Your Divorce card deck. So then I was like, I'm called to be a speaker. Now I'm called to share my story of leaving behind real estate and starting, my art gallery and healing art center, and then leaving that behind when it became clear I needed to leave that behind. And so I was going to start speaking. So I went to a speaking thing
Hmm.
because I was like, I need to learn about speaking. So I went to this speaking thing. It was my first big investment. I invested like $5,000 to go to this speaking thing out in California, San Diego. I flew from Nashua to San Diego. I had to get the babysitter to take care of the kid for 5 days. I had to have the cat and the dog taken care of, all the things. I had to park the car. I had to have the flight, the hotel room, the food, the conference for 3 days. I did the whole thing for this thing called Speak and Succeed. And they were great. They were really wonderful.
Awesome.
And they gave me like a 4-inch thick binder to go home with. But the problem was that what they taught was speaking on the college speaking circuit. And it was basically 265 out of 365 days a year on the road.
Mm.
And I was a single mom. And I
Right?
was like, oh my God, I can't do that. That's not sustainable.
Right? Yeah.
I,
It's just
it
not
was not,
possible. Yeah.
yeah, it just wasn't possible. My kiddo was in middle school. I was just like, yeah, this isn't going to happen. So I came home and I dropped my $5,000 thing on the counter. I was like, damn, I learned a lot again. And that was what ultimately led me into finding out about virtual speaking. So I started virtual speaking back in 2008 before the virus had everybody doing when we were on the phone. I was
Right.
literally on a free conference call on the phone. There was no video, there was no social media, there was nothing. And what that ended up doing for me was I ended up being heard by millions of people around the world. I ended up being able to generate multiple six figures pretty quickly after I invested. The third big investment that I made with somebody who, and this third big investment, I took my home equity line to make the third big investment. But she knew how to get people from interested to invested
Mm.
in through speaking from the stage and through speaking virtually. And as a result of that big investment, I learned how to do that. And I've since made multiple millions of dollars from home, mostly in my pajamas, mostly, in my yoga pants, pajamas in the summertime. Before we had to be on Zoom all the time, it was great because I would go out on my porch in my bikini and I'd be doing virtual speaking gigs in my bikini while the brownies were baking for the football team in my oven. Because I was a single mom, I was also committed to making sure that my kiddo was, that our house was the house where people came after school. And I was the mom that made all the brownies for the football team too. So
Oh my gosh. I love that so much. I mean, I love that, you've, I'm not going to say made mistakes, but you made choices that were not in the path that you needed, but they got you where you needed to be ultimately. And, you are not afraid to learn lessons and say, and take that lesson from, whatever experience you had and say, this was great. Didn't get me where I wanted to, but what's next? and that you're willing to invest in yourself, which I don't do. But I need to learn that.
One
Uh,
day at a time, Amy, one day at a time. And this is the important key that I want people to hear is you have to invest in yourself. You have to invest in yourself. So I will say that if I hadn't, because when I very first started in this business, I didn't know anything. And I was afraid to invest. I was afraid to invest. I was like, I can't spend any money. I've already just gone through the divorce money by having my art gallery and healing arts center for 2 years. I can't invest. I produced a street festival at the end of that thing, and um, I was terrified to invest. And I convinced myself that I could figure it all out on my own. And the first thing I did was I said, well, I can make a website. So I taught myself HTML, which I mean, I made a website. It was kind of half-assed, but I made a website, but I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours that if I had just invested, I could have used those hours actually selling my services,
right.
actually selling what I had to offer. And so one of the reasons that I highly encourage investing is to number one shorten your learning curve, like dramatically, dramatically shorten your learning curve. Because if you invest in working with somebody like me, you get the benefit of more than $1 million of investments I've made in myself.
Right.
Plus, you get the benefit of all of the experiences that I've had. So I can say, don't do that because that's a mistake, right? Plus, I can look in retrospect and say, if I had done it this in this order, because sometimes people are investing, but they're investing out of order.
Hmm.
So one of the things I did initially was I invested out of order, but now I know that and I can guide other people and say, yeah, you don't need to spend $50,000 on a website. You need to figure out what your $50,000 income stream is before you spend $50,000 on a website. You know what I mean? So, when we invest in ourselves, also, we are actually sending the signal to life that we know that what we have to offer is worthy of investing in,
Mm.
which is powerful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so powerful. I mean, what I love about the way that you speak, Angel, is that you're not like talking over people. You're like you can relate so well to me. Like I don't feel like you're like this, high and mighty, like I make millions of dollars and blah blah blah. Like, no, you're like, this is how I got here because I'm just like you, but I made these decisions and I made the investments in myself. And so it's not like, you go to some lectures and you're like falling asleep because they're just like droning on and because you're so relatable, Angel, you're like gripped right on you. And I love that. I think that's so powerful. And that's why you are who you are. That's why you're Angel B. Hartwell.
Well,
And that's why
thank
everyone
you.
wants you on their podcast. And that's why you're teaching us about sustainable businesses.
Yeah, and let's talk about well, first of all, thank you for seeing that and saying that. And one of the things I used to say when was speaking, we need to brag a little bit to let people know, yes, I have made money. Yes, I've helped people all over the world. Yes, I've been heard by millions of people. Yes, I've got 17 awards. But I put my pants on the same way that everyone else does, one leg at a time. You know what I mean? I am I want to be relatable. I want to be relatable because I can't help people if I'm so far removed from them and my story is so far removed from them that they can't see themselves potentially in my shoes. And that's really what a role model needs to do is like, if you're aspiring to any of it. If you're aspiring to be award winning or if you're aspiring to make nice money to sustain yourself,
Right.
Um, I need to be relatable. And so let's talk about sustainable business. One of the things that I work with my clients on is really doing some basic math, which sounds silly. It sounds like, I'm talking magic. I do magic, but
Do magic.
I do magic. I do a lot of magic. I do a lot of inner work with my clients as well around their mindset, around their worth, the value that they have to offer, and the money stuff, right? I do a lot of mindset
I would
work
think
around.
that that's like the majority of
Yeah,
people.
but money is like this beautiful mirror for other things. It really is. And I'll out myself. One of the things that I've done with money is I've used it to punish myself. And the reason why I have discovered that is because I had some childhood trauma that was running deep below the surface, and this, feeling like I deserved to be punished in some way. And, I had to uncover that and learn that in order to allow myself to have more money, to make more money, to give myself a raise when it was time to give myself a raise. So, one of the things I help my clients with is doing the math first, right? So, a single mom who's living in, I don't know, southern Maine, who's making jam, we're just going to use Amy as an example,
Sure.
right? Has a different set of math than an Amy living somewhere else, who's in a different circumstance, who's maybe married to the vice president of the bank or whatever, or an Amy in Oklahoma, or an Amy in Idaho, or an Amy in South Florida in Miami, who's, got 12 boyfriends and a pool to take care of. You know what I mean? So every Amy is different, and they have different math, and they're at different stages of their life. And so, what I help my clients do when I'm working with them is we look at the math and we say, what is the right number in order for you to personally be thriving, not just surviving? Because just surviving at the end of the day is not sustainable.
Mhm.
Because just surviving, what that does is it puts you in fight or flight, and it starts to erode your physical health. It starts to stress you so that you don't think clearly. It starts to create emotional havoc in your other relationships. When you're in survival, it is not sustainable. So, what's sustainable is what will it take for you to thrive? And again, it's going to be different for everybody. And it's not just the money equation, it's also the time equation, right? So, as an example, my time is exponentially more valuable being on this podcast than it is editing my own podcast. Okay.
Cool.
Because when I'm on this podcast, I'm now being exposed. My message is being exposed. My business is being exposed to hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who could potentially become a client,
Mhm.
who I could help to look at the math and look at how they're structuring their business model. So that's the other thing I work with them on in my work. We do the math, we look at the money, we look at the time that they have available. Like somebody who's taking care of an elderly parent has less time, or a child has less time than somebody who's, just empty nest,
Right.
parents are gone, And so how the time is getting used is a really important calculation as well. And then we look at the business model, and we look at what you have to offer. Like, what do you have to offer that people will happily pay for, that will properly priced, will allow you to thrive.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's so much of the down deep, like it's not superficial stuff. And it's so important for me to hear because I know that it's not something that I don't know, but um, I love that you are taking that on because when you think of business coaches, they're just like, just here's the number, just hit the number, right? Like that's how it works.
Yeah, but that's not real.
Because we have the inner stuff, we have trauma, we have, whatever has happened in our lives that has told us that money is not good or money is impossible or we can't get it or whatever.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's really
And
interesting.
there are plenty of business coaches out there. And at this point, you can just go on Chat GPT and ask Chat GPT, how do I start a business? And Chat GPT will give you data and information is literally 10% of the process. The other 90% is what is your life actually like and how can we create this business? I like to say create a business and a life that's a work of art, right? Because if you're literally using your life force, like these are your days, right? If
Right,
you're using your life force to create something, then let's have it be beautiful. Let's have it be sustainable. Let's have you be thriving. Let's not have you be run through the system like another cookie cutter, like you might as well just be working in an industry,
right.
right?
Totally. Yeah, build a life that's a work of art. Damn, that's
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want that?
Who doesn't want that? I mean, at the end of days, do you feel like you want to spend, the last few breaths that you have reflecting and say, damn, I should have realized I could give myself the opportunity to make more money or be happier or thrive.
Right.
Thrive.
Mm. Oh my gosh. And so you're a coach.
I'm not a coach.
You're not a
I
coach.
am not a coach. I
Oh,
have never
the
called myself a
mentor. I'm
coach.
sorry.
It's
Wealthy
okay.
life
I've
mentor.
never called myself a coach. I call myself I'm really calling myself a consultant because so here's the difference between a coach, a trainer, a consultant from my perspective, okay? So there are people who are educators. They'll teach you about the thing,
Mm,
right? Then there are people who are trainers. They will run you through the paces, right? Okay, you've learned about the thing, but now you're training. You're like, for
putting it
example, a
in action.
performance trainer is somebody who will teach you how to perform better on stage, and you got to practice, and you're practicing and practicing, and that's a trainer. A coach is going to have to actually come to the coach and say, coach, where do I need to improve X or Y or Z or whatever? Coach, can you help me? And a good coach, in my opinion, is going to know you well enough to say, hey, you need to do a little of this or a little of that. But a lot of coaches just actually put you in the seat and ask you questions so that
Hmm.
you figure it out for yourself. I'm a consultant. I will tell you what to do. I'll
Dang.
say,
I
do
need.
this, do this, do this, do this. Don't do that. Do it in this order. And let's see what happens. And let's remember also, Amy, I want to just make it really clear. Life in general and business is part of life is one big gigantic experiment. And life is changing the variables all the time of
Mm,
this experiment. So, you know, I call myself a consultant.
got it. Consultant. And so you are a consultant, but you also have these podcasts. And so tell us about the podcasts. We know that they're award winning.
Yeah. All right. So, my first podcast was Men on Purpose. I sold that in 2020. I was probably the first independent podcaster to sell a podcast. And then everybody came to me that was in my cohort group and said, we
Oh,
want to consult with you on how to do that. We would like you to consult with us on how to do that.
great.
So that
I
was
mean,
my
you
first
could
podcast.
sell a podcast, which is
You can.
cool. It's something
You
that you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into. You can make money off of, and someone else can just take it over. That's really cool.
correct. It's intellectual property. Okay, so this goes back to my real estate days.
Mhm.
So anything that we create, whether it's a book or a program or a website, a blog with stories in it, a podcast, it's IP, it's intellectual property.
Mm.
And different pieces of property have different values, just like Maine has different values than Virginia in terms of property values. Same with intellectual property. So I understood because I had been in real estate. I understood that I had a valuable property in my Men on Purpose podcast. And the story behind that was I actually had been running my business for a decade and had another life rupture because life will rupture you periodically because it's time for things to change in one way or another. And it was a significant life rupture that was very painful, very emotionally draining. And it created the circumstances where um, I became like I needed a year of just recovery from it. And it caused me to like really let go of a lot of things, including my business at the time. And so as I was coming out of that, uh, I I was blessed by a woman who was looking for. She was doing a show. She had been picked up by Apple TV to do a show called Fix My Brand, and I had known her from 10 years before, and I was at the kind of end of this year of coming out of this crisis, this life crisis, and I said, okay, I'm going to get out my Rolodex and just start calling everybody I know to see what the hell I should be doing with myself at this point because
Mm.
I need to pay the mortgage. and so I reached out to a lot of people. And one of the things I thought was, well, I can sell high ticket. So I started selling high ticket for other coaches. And then I reached out and connected with her, and she was doing this show called Fix My Brand. And I was like, well, I just put my brand in the fire. I literally burned my business down. I put all my stuff in the fire. My whole brand was all like peacock stuff. I had a peacock puppet. Everything went into a fire. I had a huge fire ceremony and burned it all. And I said, so you don't have a brand to fix. You have a brand to resurrect out of the ashes. And we ended up creating a new brand. And the new brand was really focused on serving men because I got the calling at that point to serve men. Before I had been mostly serving women, helping them to feel great speaking and powerful asking for money. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's time to serve men. It's like, okay. So she helped me build the brand. And as we were building it, I started thinking, she was like, oh, we should do a TV show. I was like, no, I'm not doing a freaking TV show. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, the men that I was interested in serving were executive men. And I could see them in my vision. I was like, they're out jogging, or they're on the treadmill, or they're driving to work, or they're bicycling. They're they're not watching YouTube,
Mm.
but they are listening
Get
to
in their ears.
podcasts. They are listening to podcasts. And so that's how I started my first podcast, Men on Purpose. And I did that show. So I started it January of 2018. And um, by the spring of 2019, I decided to start Wickedly Smart Women. And so Wickedly Smart Women launched in September of 2019. So then I was doing two shows from September to December of 2019. And I was like, I felt like I had taken on too much at that point. At that point, I just still didn't have the bandwidth to do two shows. And so I thought, I think I'm done. I think I'm going to put Men on Purpose on hiatus. And I had a bank of episodes. So I still had 3 more months to go. And March of 2020, I was an icon of influence at the New Media Summit, which was a gathering of people who came together where the icons of influence, we were all podcast hosts, and the audience was all there pitching us to be guests on our shows. And on the fourth day of the event, the guy who hosted it would have a mastermind. Well, this is the week that Corona shuts down. We're in this conference and Corona is shutting down the world, right? Everybody's like, you know, we were in this little bubble for 3 days
Wow.
and the stock market was crashing and all kinds of stuff was happening. And we were in this little bubble for 3 days. And on the fourth day, we had our mastermind. And one of the people that was an icon was a paid host. So here's a secret of how you can make money. You can be a paid host podcasting. You
Oh,
don't have to, do it voluntarily. There are people who pay people to be hosts. So anyway, he was a paid host, but it wasn't his show. It was a real estate show. Somebody else owned the show, and he was sitting at the table and he was like, I just want my own show. I just want creative control. I just want to help men. I just want to help them be on purpose. And my show was called Men on Purpose. So all of a sudden, this idea pops into my head, and I was like, I wonder if he would buy it. So that's how Men on Purpose got sold. I approached him at the break and I said, would you be interested in buying Men on Purpose? And he was like, yes. And so, and everything is monetizable, Amy. So I now know how to start and grow a sellable show. So I could sell that. I also know how to take people through the sales process. So I can be a consultant for people who want to sell their show. I know the process of transferring the show, the IP from one person to another. That's monetizable. Like everything is monetizable in my world. You can monetize anything. It's just a matter of what you have the time and bandwidth and interest and support to do. So I sold Men on Purpose, Wickedly Smart Women. I kept going and I've been doing Wickedly Smart Women. We just passed our 300th episode in November. I've been doing it for 5 years and a few months. We've got 14 awards, number one internationally ranked, and I monetize. I monetize all my shows. So Men on Purpose, I had my first $50,000 client within 4 months. Wickedly Smart Women, I had my first client before the show even launched. And leading Visionaries podcast, which I just started in June of last year, 2023. So it's a year and a half old now. That show's already generated six figures from one client.
from one client.
One client.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Because um you can monetize if you know what the model that you want to create, if you have your math squared away, and if you understand um how to make your offer and you understand that you're worth six figures in consulting fees for somebody who's building a multi-million dollar business.
Right.
I
Wow.
mean, the business that she's building is literally, I mean, her first client was a $500,000 client. I helped her within 3 weeks, she had a $500,000 client. So her paying me six figures to get a $500,000 client, you know, that's her first $500,000 client. Every other client is going to be a $500,000 client for the particular industry that she's in. So
Wow. That's amazing.
yeah,
You're
I'm a
am-
bargain. I'm a bargain for her.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and worth every penny. Um, how is Men on Purpose doing now?
He ended up changing the name to something else, and then he changed the name to something else again, and I have no idea what's happening with that, but it's not mine to think about.
Not mine.
Not
Okay.
mine to think about at this point. Yeah.
That's so awesome. What a story, Angel. Oh my gosh. I just love it. And I love that you're so confident in yourself and you're just like, yeah, that's how it works.
Well, I've fallen on my face many times, Amy, and you get confident by standing up again
Mm.
and just, continuing to move forward fearlessly and do your math, trust that you're worthy of the money. Um, let go of worry,
Mm.
trust in your divinity and your divine. I mean, I've been literally guided by spirit since 2001. 2001, since my spiritual awakening in 2001. Sometimes spirit tells me the weirdest shit. Like, but sometimes spirit comes down and says, maybe he'd be interested in buying that.
Right?
And I'm
Angel,
like,
did you
yeah,
hear
that's
what
a
you just
great
said?
idea.
Wow. And you guys, if you start to follow Angel on social media, she has her reels, she has little like floating dollar bills in in her screen, which is really fun. You're just like she's so in it, and I love that. You're just
Do
so
you know
authentic.
why, Amy? Do you know why I have floating money, the flying money? Because one of my clients a few years ago, I took on this client. She had a multi-million dollar sticks and bricks business out in Portland, Oregon, I think, somewhere in that area, or Port something, Washington, out west. Anyway, she told me that in her phone, whenever I was calling her, because I was doing my service delivery over the phone, not on Zoom with her, um, she said, whenever you call, the flying money emoji pops up. I was like, really? She's like, yeah, I have the flying money emoji for you. I was like, really? I was like, great. So now it's because a client gave that to me. It's not because I chose it. It was because it was given to me by a
That's
client.
even better. It's,
Totally.
I mean, and I love that everything that you do has a story because that is, it just makes you so much more relatable. But
Aw,
I just love everything you do. I think that you are super duper smart and you are so generous um with your story, with your education and so willing to share, you know, the hard times and the good times and it's all important. Like it all matters and it all gets you where you are.
totally. Everything is monetizable, Amy.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't want to take up too much of your time, Angel. I so appreciate this. But so when I say the word sustainability to you, what does that mean personally?
Yeah, for me, that means that I am actively engaged in communing with the earth itself, and that I am listening, and that I am doing my very best to leave the smallest footprint, only footprints of light, that I am consciously choosing to support others to create sustainable businesses that are built around their their own divine calling, because I believe there are many people who have incredible solutions for some of the horrible things that we've been seeing happening, that just need that extra support to say, the person, and let me be that person to say, yes, you can. Yes, you can do this. Yes, you can. You can do this. Because, I actually had a poem I wrote a few years ago when I was sitting at the river next to a toxic waste site. And in this little poem I wrote about, what wouldn't it be wonderful if if we found this little creature who would eat plastic and poop out compost?
Like a worm?
And yeah, some kind of little creature that could eat plastic and poop out compost, because there's a lot to be corrected. There's a lot to be corrected. Um, and we want to correct it sustainably. So for me, sustainability means really being being aligned with the pulse of the earth.
Oh my gosh, that is powerful right there. Being aligned with the pulse of the earth. Dang, girl. And so I'm curious how it works. So in the sustainability realm, like just to kind of bring it to that a little bit, like so you are a busy business person and you also manage a home. Like how do you balance that?
Well, one thing that you do is you do your math and you look at the things that you actually are best at, and you hire people you create your own little economy. You hire people. I have a team of people who help me with social media. I have a guy that does all my podcast editing because, like I said before, it's more valuable for me to spend an hour having this conversation with you than it is for me to be spending the time both physically, because my body is like,
Right.
on the computer. Um, you know, I have structured a sustainable business model that allows me to thrive. And I also make choices. I do have somebody who comes and cleans my house once a month. I could do my house cleaning, and I did for years and years and years. And finally, my business coach was like, stop doing that, because literally I pay them $200 to clean my house with sustainable cleaning products.
Right.
They came in with that smelly stuff. I was like, no, don't use that stuff in my
Gonna
house.
kill me. Yeah.
You're going to kill me. Yeah. I do pay for my cleaning people. They're coming tomorrow. And when you are thinking sustainably and you are valuing what you have to offer properly and you are generating the income, the revenue that's required in order to thrive, you are also calculating for delegation. I calculate for the bookkeeper, I calculate for the CPA, I calculate for the lawyer, I calculate for the cleaning lady, I calculate for the podcast editing team. You have to calculate for all of those things.
Right.
It's not just about me. And so when people look at, when I talk about 5-figure paydays, right? When I talk about having a 10 or 15 or $20,000 payday, all those other people are part of that. It's not just me. It's not like me running around with, all the money coming to me. I have a structure. I have technology that's supporting me. It all has to be looked at and properly honored and calculated.
Mm.
And then the work is looking at yourself and saying, okay, what's the highest and best use of my life force, of my vision, of my voice, of my time? And
Right.
then everything else, as soon as you can delegate it, it's got to be delegated.
Mm. That's awesome. So, I mean, I know that there are people that would say like, stay in your zone of genius, which I think is, kind of what you're saying, but you have to make sure that you have your people in it. So it's delegation so that you can do what you enjoy, what brings you joy, what brings you the energy that you need to feel fulfilled.
Joy and juice.
Joy and juice. Dang, girl. That's insane. So good. So Angel, people are going to be like, how do I get this? Like, I need this. We all need this. How does someone find you? Are you going to be able to
Well,
remember it all?
um, so I think probably for this community and based on the conversation that we just had, I think the thing I would like to do is I'd like to give a gift, if that would be okay.
I'm not opposed to that.
Okay, great. So I have a book called Be Heard by Millions and Live Your Destiny. And it's the story of pretty much the story I just told you of how I started my online speaking business years ago. And the book just won its third award. It was an International Impact Award winner, a Bookfest Award winner, and a Global Book Award winner. And you can get that book at beheardbymillions.com.
Okay. Be heard
And,
by millions.
yeah, and people can certainly tune into either of the podcasts, Wickedly Smart Women, or Leading Visionaries. And then my main website is wealthylifementor.com.
Wealthylifementor.com.
Yeah, but
So,
go get the book. You can have the
yeah,
book,
definitely get the book. I got the
the
book.
whole book. Yeah,
hmm
yeah.
Um, Angel B. Hartwell, thank you so much. I I adore you. I just think you're wonderful, and I wish I was closer so I could hug you.
Do a virtual hug. And
Mm.
I am so grateful for the opportunity to be on your show, Amy. I really appreciate what you're doing. And I'm grateful that there are people who are listening and that are taking seriously sustainability, because I think more important than ever at this point that we pay attention to be mindful and intelligent about what we're gifted in the form of this planet.
Right.
Yeah.
Really. Thank you. And yeah, and I think sustainability in business is super important as well. Like we can just, kill ourselves for, who knows what, but
Yep.
to be, I mean, just mindfulness is so, I think I say it all the time, but it's just like, it's so important to like keep that in mind. Like, don't kill yourself. You need to be smarter about it. And I need to learn how to do
Right. Well,
that.
keep learning. Keep learning and invest in yourself.
Yes. Invest in yourself, you guys. Okay. All right. Thanks.